We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AV Rant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. My name is Rob H., and this week I am here with...
Lee Overstreet, pinch hitting in the middle of natural disasters.
That is what it is. Tom Andry is unexpectedly... unexpectedly from last week, we didn't anticipate this, but then not unexpectedly in that the news has been around for the past couple of days before we're recording this. Hurricane Idalia, or Tropical Storm Idalia as it is right now, but expected to turn into a hurricane by the time it makes landfall in Florida, is barreling down towards St. Petersburg in Florida, where Tom lives. We are crossing our fingers, hoping that it makes a turn like last year's storm did. What was that? Hurricane Ian last year made a turn and
north.
Yeah, more or less avoided Tom's house. We're hoping the same thing happens, but they are under a mandatory evacuation order right now, so Tom cannot be here. That is obviously understandable, and so we're very thankful that on pretty short notice this week, Lee Overstreet was able to step in to pinch hit once again.
I joke with Rob all the time that I'm like a co-host behind a piece of glass that says break in case of emergency, and you just hit it, and I just come sit in this chair and go, hi! Yes, there's a lot going on my end too.
There's right.
A chance of thunderstorms today, so we'll see if I get kaboomies here. And you have some sort of construction situation or plumbing that might be happening?
I had some thunder going on earlier this morning. Seems to have passed now. But happy for the wind to come in and clear the air a little bit. But lightning is not something we need around here. So that's been going on. And then there's it's just annual duct cleaning for the entire apartment building that I'm in, and so if I had recorded with Tom at our usual time, which is earlier, totally would have avoided, but they're probably going to come and interrupt Lee and I at some point, so interruptions are possible.
Plow right through.
Noises are possible, fans are going, there's all kinds of stuff going on. I'll denoise what I can, we'll edit together if we need to.
Anything could happen today.
This is a bit of a mishmash of an episode, but you know what? It all kind of worked out. Like we had plenty of questions left over from last week, but we had like a smaller than usual amount of new questions come in this week, so I think we'll be able to get through everything. Might be shorter than 2 hours this week. If it is, I am not going to stretch anything, because we're gonna do what we can, answer the questions, and get the heck out of here. That's what's going to happen.
Sometimes you just need a quickie, you know what I'm saying?
That's what it's going to be. It's still going to be well over an hour. There's no question about that. But to let everybody know who the heck we are, this is AV Rant. We are your home theater and AV questions answered. And to get those questions answered, all you have to do is email them to us. Our email address is question@avrant.com. That is by far the best way to reach us, question@avrant.com. Email us your questions, please. You can, of course, come to our website, which is, surprise, surprise, avrant.com, where you can see our show notes. You can see our Flickr albums for images that we are referencing, and you can see those images on YouTube as well as we're talking about them. youtube.com/avrant is the way to see our videos. It's just a couple of talking heads and some images that go in there once in a while, but it's a fun way to watch the podcast. I got timestamps on those YouTube versions as well, so if you just want to hop directly to something, it's very convenient. And you can get in touch with us some other ways, facebook.com/avrant podcast for the podcast itself, and then you can reach us individually. We all have email addresses here. I'm rob@avrant.com. Tom is tom@avrant.com. Lee is lee@avrant.com. So
how about that? That still feels good and still feels new.
Doesn't it though? Yeah.
I know.
You see,
and I don't mind
happens.
being customer support.
When we made you wait 10.5 years, now it just feels new forever.
Actually, it was only 9.5 years,
okay.
I think. Because I think the first show I ever did was at the end of 2013.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a minute.
And so let's see, social media. I mean, I'm around. If I'm on a social media platform, I'll be under the handle @FirstReflect. I am trying to use Threads more than just about anything else right now. Not everybody else is coming along with me, so that's proving to be somewhat of a challenge. Look, It's on the web now, so you don't have to use mobile only. It's got the
Right.
chronological and following only feed, so it's all getting better. It's a nicer place. Come on back and give it a try if you were like, I don't really like this in the early going, which I wouldn't blame anybody if they tried it early on and were like, it's not great yet. They've improved it a lot, so come check out Threads.
Right.
Come join
It's
me
that
over there.
catch-22 of nobody goes there until everybody goes there.
That's what it is. I mean, they
That's
had
the
such
only
a
thing.
boom at the beginning. If they had been,
Right.
Honestly, now I'm wishing they hadn't jumped the gun and they had actually just waited the extra 1.5 weeks and
Right.
had some of these things in place. Anyway, whatever it is, Lee Overstreet is available on Threads as well, right? Under one of your accounts.
Under the Tesla Lusa account.
That's right.
So I talk about, EVs and Tesla things
Mm-hmm.
and energy things. And I'm on X/Twitter as Tesla Lusa and on Threads as Tesla Lusa. My personal account on X/Twitter is Lee Overtweet.
Yes.
And as we've talked about, it makes me very mad that I had this cool name that was
you
Lee
haven't
Overtweet.
changed it yet.
And it's not going to be Lee Over X, but Lee Overtweet is over there. But, that's just...
I mean, do you maybe just change the V and over to an X and then,
Oh,
then
that's
you kind of got
gross.
it in there?
So stupid. It's all so stupid.
It
But
is.
again, it's the momentum of I've been there for years, and so how do you move on over?
Yep.
But what I need to do is just kind of sit down and you can make yourself in your browser separate windows, and I need one window that just has 5 tabs to all my
Right.
social media.
That would help.
I need to do something like that to make it easier. But generally, for listeners of this show, Lee at AV Rant.
Yeah,
will
you
get
know
an
what? We're
email
just
from
going back to good old email. That's
Yeah.
the most steadfast way to reach all of us at this point. So there you go.
It really is, yeah.
It's our various 3-letter names at avrant.com. That's the best way to reach us. So with that out of the way, I mean, it's only been a couple of weeks since we talked to you, Lee, but anything new and interesting happening in the meantime to catch up on?
Well, a little more parental stress, although I
Okay.
think just this morning we found some health services
Nice.
that can help my dad and my stepmom who cares for my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go read the paperwork with Dad tomorrow and help figure that. So that it's been very stressful. He's had some health situations this past week. It's been kind of awful, but I think it's all coming together now.
Yeah.
So again, hopefully brighter points on the horizon for that situation.
Fingers crossed for you. I know that situation all too well, and I know the stress of it, and I know the relief of it when things do finally settle into a new
Yeah.
routine and are going okay. So
And you can imagine in this country of the United States, you're stunned when you find some health care that actually doesn't cost you any extra and does what you think it should.
Well, that's the thing. There are really good, very helpful, very nice people in the U.S. looking to do
Yeah.
those things. You just gotta
Oh, yeah.
find them. So
You have to find, and it has to fit within your budget and fit
That's right.
within Medicare and your Blue Cross supplement. But
All that
I'm sure there
stuff.
are plenty of other listeners who are in the right sort of age group and
Absolutely. No
understand.
question.
So, anyway, but on a good note, I got the car back. So
That's right.
Finally,
yes,
2
you
months.
are
It
Tesla
was-
Lusa, and you actually got your Tesla back after all this time. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the big news for sure.
And it's so nice to have the right car back again
Mm-hmm.
because we selected the features we wanted.
Right.
And the everything from the color to the range to the stereo to, it is exactly, it just feels right. The seat
Excellent.
feels right. You know what I'm saying? I got my steering wheel exactly where I want it. You know how it is.
Yes, I do. Yeah, that's very good.
just right.
Congratulations. And yes.
Thank you. Good and bad stuff all in 1 week as per usual. But generally life continues and we okay.
Okay, well, we're going to just plow right ahead, go right into this podcast. We're going to pick up with what we've watched this week, our regular segment that we start out with. Lee, what have you been watching this past week or two, as the case might be?
The main thing off the top of my head is that I just, was looking at sci-fi possibilities of what I could watch. And I saw Black Mirror listed before. And in the past, I thought it was more just a drama that would just be a series that was depressing. That's what it looked like to me, and I kind of forgot about it. And so what I didn't know, and in case listeners don't know, is that it's more like the Twilight Zone. It's separate
Yes, very much so.
episodes. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's
And
an
so-
anthology show.
And I can't remember how I got to it, but you get on an internet tangent, and I was reading something explaining what it was and a couple of intriguing sounding plots. And I went, holy cow. So I just picked an episode at random.
Yep.
Like the first.
Actually, that's good because the very first episode of season 1 is probably the weakest episode of the entire series, so it is
How about
not
that?
a strong start. Many people check out episode 1 of season 1 and just kind of get turned off and never come back, which is a super duper shame because, like I say, just honestly, just skip that one. Just go straight to episode 2. It's not like there's any sort of serialized story that is necessary to have watched them all or in order or anything. Feel free to hop around, watch one at a time, just find a synopsis that you go, oh, that's kind of intriguing. Go ahead and watch it because you're not going to have any sort of problem with serialization or anything like that.
I might just go with this most recent season first. So I started with the episode that's got Salma Hayek.
Okay.
And my brain exploded and I went, this is cool. Why didn't I know? And it's well shot and everything else. So
it's a very good show. I enjoy it very much. I have not seen every single episode, but yeah, it's an excellent show. All right. Glad you found that. Yeah.
By the way, I'm gonna wiggle a knob over here because I'm having trouble in my headphones, but you tell us what you've been watching.
We have mentioned that, and then Lee is like, how did I not know that this was around? I'm like, you're not listening to us, Lee. That's the problem. You
can ask my wife. That is me. I don't listen. I don't listen.
You don't believe us sometimes. Like, you still haven't watched Arcane, which is such a you gotta watch. I know you have Netflix. You're watching Black Mirror.
Right. Send me a reminder. I'll give it a go. Text me. Just text me the words, just the name of the show. Email me at lee@avrant.com.
That's right. Yeah, that's the real way to get your attention.
If anyone else has good sci-fi ideas.
So I have not watched a ton this week. Tom and I, we texted a little bit, and Tom was like, do I have to watch Star Wars Rebels to watch Ahsoka? Because he's like, I don't have the time for that. I was like, I'm not really planning to. I hadn't watched Rebels. I'm just going to hop right into Ahsoka. And then I saw some of the early reviews and some reviewers that I trust, and they're like, so you could get by without having watched Rebels, but oh boy, are you really not going to get the full context of, like, basically, they're going to say the names, so that's your introduction if you've never watched anything of Rebels before. They're going to say the names in Ahsoka, but those names aren't going to mean anything to you, whereas they're going to mean a whole bunch if you've watched Rebels. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'm watching Rebels. So
here we go again. You have to watch a show before you can watch a show.
So I've made it through the entire first season of Star Wars Rebels. There are 4 seasons. The first season is the shortest at 15 episodes. The others are 22 or 21, something in that range. Now, I mean, these are like 20-minute episodes. They're 20-minute cartoons that ran on Disney XD. So I want to say, the voice acting is really, really good.
Right on.
The story overall throughout season 1, it's another one of those shows where you kind of got to get to about episode 8 or episode 9, then it starts to pick up, gets more interesting. The first 7 episodes are very much just character building, and it was okay. I wasn't like super duper hooked. I wasn't super duper in love with the characters, but yeah, episode 8 onwards, it gets stronger. So I was pretty pleased with the story overall. I'm certainly not angry that I watched it or anything like that, but the animation itself, definitely not my favorite. So, I mean, if you've seen any of the Star Wars Clone Wars cartoon, it's a similar look to that, where, like, there are no hair textures for anybody. Like, everybody's hair just looks like, solid plasticine.
Solid block. Yeah.
When the Wookiees come on, boy, is that looks awful. That looks absolutely dreadful when the Wookiees come on. Because, when you have just creatures that are entirely covered in fur and you have no hair texturing whatsoever,
Can Dreadful Wookiees be the name of this episode?
Absolutely, it could. But that is not the strength at all. But the ships look almost as good as the full-blown movies. I mean, I'm sure they just imported the same models and they gave it like a little bit of a texture pass to put a little bit of a cartoony look on it, but the ships look fantastic. The stormtroopers look really good. In fact, they look very much just like the CG rendered stormtroopers in the movies. But the rest of the show, I mean, it basically looks like the pre-visualization that they do for the movies. Like, it's there's no texturing, there's no, like light coming through people's ears or anything, advanced lighting or anything like that. It's pretty basic looking, and some of the animation, like, oh man, the facial expressions, I don't know who was in charge, the animating, directing or something like that, but like basically they're like, we really need you to know that this person is sad right now. And since the voice acting and the scripting is actually quite good, we're not going to just have them face camera and say, I am sad. They're going to put an emoji on that person's face of how sad they are. It's not going to be, it's not going to be anything realistic. It's going to be ridiculously overblown facial expressions when they want you to really know. So it's a little tough to watch.
By the way, those listening, I'm making terrible faces,
That's right.
And I guarantee you it will be the YouTube thumbnail of me going.
That's right. So There you go. There's pluses and minuses, but I'm in now. I'm gonna go ahead and watch it all before I start Ahsoka. Ahsoka's coming out episodically week to week, so I should have time. And by the time I'm all the way through 4 seasons of Rebels, all of Ahsoka should be out, and I can just binge that. And there we go. I'll know what the heck is going on.
All I have to do is watch 4 seasons of one show to understand this show that I wanted to watch. I can't take it anymore, man.
I know all the characters now from having watched the first season, so I'm pretty sure I could go into Ahsoka. And honestly, I've seen enough online that like I know some of what happens at the end of the 4th season, just spoilers, which I don't really care about, so I went ahead and read it. So I'm sure I could jump into Ahsoka, but whatever. I'm enjoying Rebels well enough, so there it is.
Right
Dreadful
on.
Wookiees and all. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about our listeners of the week. Listeners of the week are people who have supported this podcast in some way, and one of those ways is financially. Now, once again, Tom is the only person who sees who donates via PayPal, so I do not know if we have had any PayPal donations this week. If you would like to make a one-time donation via PayPal, just come to our website, avrant.com. And over on the right-hand side, there's a logo of a cup of coffee, and if you click on that link, it will take you to PayPal. You do not need a PayPal account. You could just use a credit card to make a one-time donation, or we even have an option now to do a recurring donation through PayPal if you would like to support us financially that way. But I can go ahead and thank our patrons over at patreon.com/avrantpodcast. That is a place you can go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So we have 133 patrons signed up to do just that right now. Thank you all very much. And Russell is someone who signed up just recently to become a new patron. And he actually asked, he's like, do we automatically mention the names of new patrons when they sign up? No, we do not, Russell. I mean, a lot of other podcasts do. We are frankly just too lazy. That's really all it was pure laziness. And again, Tom's the only one who actually has access to the account, so I can see how many people have signed up just as a user, but I don't see the names. Tom sees the names, and he ain't going to collect them every week. So there it is.
Plus, we're very discreet. We respect your privacy, and we know how
that too.
embarrassing it might be to admit you listen to AV Rant.
It could
so
be.
We don't
One never knows.
We don't tell anyone.
But if you put in your email, hey, I'm a Patreon supporter, then we're going to mention you then, and that's how sometimes you hear people's specific names. So, big thanks to all our financial supporters, 133 patrons over at Patreon. Russell, thank you for being one of the newest ones. And then we have people who are just sending us notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. And
here we go.
That's the case this week, isn't it? Yeah, by hook or by crook, we're going to get an episode out. So thank you to Nick Matt Elmer, who says he loves our show and thanks us for being no nonsense. I mean, thank you, Elmer, for saying that. I don't know if we're no nonsense. I think we might be 100% nonsense, and it just circles its way back around until you feel like it's no nonsense anymore.
He's referring to the logic of our thought processes when it comes to audio video.
Advertisers, right? You never have to worry that the only reason we're recommending something is because they're paying us to talk about it. Never the case. So,
right? You're not going to hear us say, they sent us this for free, but my thoughts are my own, and I'm saying what I want to, and they're not reviewing what I'm saying. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Nope. That's not us. So thank you for that. Gurinder also sent us a note of gratitude. He's pretty sure Tom was trying to think of the word Dynamometer. That's what I had to read that for a second. I'm like, work it out, Rob. Use your phonetics. You can do this. Dynamometer, or just Dino for short, which is of course much easier. Tom was talking about testing a car's horsepower last week. So right. Too bad Tom's not here. I'll have to remind him. We're all gonna forget. Sorry, Gurinder. It's never gonna reach Tom what you just said. And Greg
send it
also
to Tom at avrant.com.
He's never gonna see it there. He doesn't look at his emails.
He doesn't look at anything. you have to pay him via PayPal and send a note along with it. And then he'll know.
That is true. When I remind him to look up who's paid us via PayPal, then he'll see the note. I messed up all those names. So Nick, Matt, Elmer, Gurinder, Greg, thank you all very much for sending us your notes of gratitude and encouragement. They are very much appreciated these days. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. So with that, I'm going to give my voice a rest, take a little swig of pop, and let Lee read some news for us.
All right, swig that pop, Rob. Kaleidoscape is releasing new Terra Prime movie servers that feature an all-new board design inside, faster processing, up to 2.5 gig Ethernet, and the option to use solid-state drives. If you can max out the 2.5 gig network speed for your downloads, a 2-hour 4K movie can be downloaded in as little as 8 minutes on the spinning hard drives and just 4 minutes on the solid state drives. The solid state drives also allow you to play back up to 25 simultaneous 4K movies in your mansion on the Kaleidoscape Strato players. 25! You have too many kids.
And I'm going to proclaim that the only people doing that are in a mansion because 25 rooms, which I dare say is more rooms than most houses.
You don't need that many rooms. You could have like a bunch of your kids in one large room.
Possibly, yes.
With tablets all streaming, I suppose.
It would mean 25 Strato players. And
that's right. Strato players. Yes.
Those are $4,000 a piece. So I'm going to proclaim that if you're doing
gymnasium-size room, I can picture it.
I'm proclaiming that if you're doing 25 of those, you also have a mansion.
Maybe if Elon Musk had all his kids over at once.
Right.
Something like that.
Gotta be that.
There are 2 chassis sizes for the new servers. Compact Terra Prime is basically the size of an external 3.5-inch hard drive. There's an 8 terabyte for $5,000, 22 terabyte for $10,000, or an 8 terabyte SSD version also for $10,000.
Yeah.
Full-size Terra Prime is designed to fit into an equipment rack, 48 terabytes for $16,000, 88 terabytes for $25,000, or the 31 terabyte SSD version also for $25,000. That's car money, but okay. Kaleidoscape is also now offering their ultimate 4K system. It's 2 of the 88 terabyte Terra Prime servers and 1 Strato player, and it comes with every 4K movie available in the US at the time of shipment already preloaded onto the servers. It cost $90,000.
$90,000. There it is.
$1,000. If you buy one, please let us know.
I mean, that's $55,000 worth of hardware, apparently, because 2 of the 88 terabytes, $25,000 a piece, plus... sorry. I messed that up. $54,000 worth of hardware, because it's $4,000 for the Strato player. Yes, what a horrible mistake that would have been to let slide. So yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how many 4K movies. I mean, the longer you wait, don't you get more for the same price? Because there's more 4K movies coming out all the time. But
if
in any
you're
event,
spending $90,000 on this, I'm pretty sure you don't care.
I hope the studios are getting their cut. One would hope.
They better be. I hope the actors and other people participating in the strike.
But it is interesting doing the 4K movies through the Kaleidoscape, because Kaleidoscape, I mean, this is through Kaleidoscape's own store, and they have their own direct line to the studios.
All right.
So this isn't the same as what's available physically on disc. Of course, there's many crossover, but like Kaleidoscape actually has several titles available in 4K that are not available on physical Ultra HD Blu-rays. But then there are some movies that are on 4K Blu-ray that are not on Kaleidoscape, because it all has to do with licensing deals. So, it's not going to be the same as what's available on disc, like exactly one for one. There's going to be some on there that you can't get on disc, and then a handful that are on disc that you can't get on Kaleidoscape yet. So, yeah, it's an interesting situation.
Do they like negotiate for like a better bit rate or a higher quality?
Well, yeah, they Kaleidoscape actually gets the mezzanine files, which is basically like one step below the master. It's like the first copy of the master, which digitally doesn't really make much difference anymore. But I mean, the master is like raw, uncompressed. So the mezzanine is like the first level of compression. So that's the files that Kaleidoscape actually gets directly, and then they create their own distributable version from that. So very often, in terms of just like counting the number of gigabytes in the movie, it'll be larger than the number of gigabytes on the Ultra HD Blu-ray. So they do their own encoding. So yeah, I mean, it is absolute pristine top quality. If you got $90,000, it's not a bad deal, honestly. You're getting all those 4K all those 4K discs all just preloaded. You don't have to download anything until the new ones come out.
If you have $90,000 to throw at movies, I bet all kinds of things are easy in life.
Sure.
I imagine so. We talked about Sony PlayStation's mysterious Project Q portable device. I remember that. And now there are more details. The official name is the PlayStation Portal, and it will cost $200 when it launches in November. It's a 1080p 60 Hz LCD screen with 500 nits brightness sandwiched between a PlayStation DualSense controller that's been split in half. However, the analog thumbsticks are actually the same, smaller sticks that you'll find on the PlayStation VR2 Sense controllers, not the full-size DualSense sticks. Excuse me. Battery life is supposed to be the same as the DualSense controller, so about 6 to 7 hours. All it can do is stream games that are being powered by your PlayStation 5 console. It can't do anything all by itself. It cannot play cloud-based games from your PlayStation Plus premium subscription on its own, as we had hoped. In fact, it apparently can't even play cloud games being handled by your PS5.
Yeah.
So the PS Portal is strictly for playing games stored on your PS5 hard drive, essentially making it more like a Wii U gamepad than anything else, but a really nice one, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's basically what we feared. That is what the preliminary things back when it was known as Project Q. Well, that is the other very strange thing, which is you cannot just use it as a controller for your PlayStation 5. Like, yeah, it can't just be your second controller for player 2. If you're using this, the game plays on the built-in screen. That's what it does. That's
and not on your television simultaneously. Yeah.
I don't know. A little bizarre for $200. It seems pretty niche.
It still feels like this is the first step heading toward what we were hoping for.
I guess, but why isn't it the thing we were like? Why?
Because you push products out nowadays immediately. The second a product can do anything slightly different, you sell it, and then you update it over time. That's how it
really
works
has to be. I have a PlayStation 5, but I don't get to play it for the specific reason that I have one television and someone else is always using it. So I'm going to go ahead and buy what is essentially a little portable TV I can hold on to, because that's what this is. It's nothing else.
Maybe you like to play those things, but you like to lay weirdly on the couch like I watch movies, something like that. And maybe you have a beanbag that's your favorite place to be in the whole world, and you just want to play there. That could be it.
Yeah, and it's pretty tough for me to say, like, I'm going to recommend people run out and get this thing, because functionality wise you have to know this is exactly the device that you wanted and you're willing to pay $200 for it.
One other fun limitation, it doesn't have Bluetooth at all.
That's right.
You can't use any Bluetooth headphones with the PlayStation Portal. So you really do have to be snuggled down with this thing and put your earbuds in wired.
It does have a 3.5 millimeter jack, which amazingly it has that, but it does not have Bluetooth. But Sony, being Sony, they thought of this whole you want to use wireless headphones thing.
Right. Instead, they're releasing 2 new headsets because it's Sony. The Pulse Explorer earbuds for $200 and the Pulse Elite headset for $150. They use the new proprietary, of course, PlayStation Link wireless signal to provide zero latency lossless audio. I'm sure it'll sound good, but of course it has to be Sony only.
That's
the
right.
Pulse Explorer are true wireless earbuds, but they are quite large. Another interesting fact is that both of the new Pulse headphones use planar magnetic drivers. Wow.
Yeah.
They come with a USB dongle so that you can use them with your PS5 console directly or with a PC. And the Pulse Explorer and Elite do have Bluetooth, so you can connect them to your phone, and it will actually mix phone and game sounds together, so you can use them for a separate chat while you're playing.
That's right.
Plus, Elite also comes with a charging hook that you can mount to display your headset when it's not in use. Very important to show that you bought fancy proprietary headphones.
That's what it is.
Nice
so
little
I
stand.
wanted to credit as far as some of the photos that I showed and where some of the more detailed information, because a lot of the write-ups didn't have all the details that we just went through there. So I wanted to credit Adam Savage's Tested channel on YouTube. It wasn't Adam Savage himself, but one of the people who's always on the channel there, who went through a lot of some of the finer details there. And so I shared some of their images as we were going through. So we definitely want to credit them for having that excellent coverage. But I mean, look, am I... Even if these are real, so okay, if they're really good headphones, I guess it's not so bad, because you can still just use them as regular Bluetooth headphones and connect them to any other device. Planar magnetic at that price honestly isn't that bad a deal. Like $150 for over the ear planar magnetic headphones is actually a pretty decent deal. So I'm not really angry at it that way. Then it does have the PlayStation Link, which you know, at this point only works directly with the PlayStation Portal, or it comes with a little USB dongle, so you plug that into your computer or directly into your PlayStation 5 system, and you can use PlayStation Link lossless, latency-free audio that way. But I mean, just Oh, Sony. Why,
Yeah.
Sony? Why?
Because they wanted to sell you another $150 or $200 pair of headphones.
There's
That's why.
Bluetooth
At least you can
aptX.
use it with other stuff. And to be fair, Sony makes really good headphones. I've got some studio
Sure.
headphones over here that I've had for
I mean, I was
years.
not impressed with the original Pulse headphones. I didn't think they were very good at all. So I'm hoping that the new Pulse Elite for $150 is considerably better. That would be
I mean, it's
an
elite.
advantage. It's elite.
quote, unquote,
it's right there in the
elite.
name. Yes. Yeah.
So where did those planar magnetic drivers in the new Sony PlayStation Pulse Explorer and Elite headsets come from? Well, we can't say for 100% certain, but Sony did just purchase Audis for an undisclosed amount.
Think they pronounce that brand name as Audizee.
I don't care. It's Audis for me.
I know that's the way it's
funny.
spelled, but I think it's Audizee. I don't know. I've heard it
sure.
both ways, but I do believe it's Audizee.
Audis is funnier. Audizee was quite well known for their planar magnetic headphone models, so we're just putting 2 and 2 together here.
They had like the
Sony's-
LCD2, the LCD3. They were very popular planar magnetic headphones.
Sony says Audizee will continue to operate independently and still make products for other platforms. So, okay.
Yeah.
They absorbed their Audis. Audis does sound like maybe that's a cereal. Yeah.
Right.
I just said absorb your Audis. Dolby announced Dolby Atmos Flex Connect, which is their own protocol for adding a pair of wireless speakers to a TV that already decodes and plays back Dolby Atmos content through its built-in speakers. So you can add it on. The TV and wireless speakers will both have to support Flex Connect, so this isn't a backwards compatible system that can be added to existing equipment. TCL is their first partner, and they'll have Flex Connect televisions and speakers available in 2024. The TV will have a microphone built in, along with auto calibration to detect the positions of the 2 wireless speakers at the back of the room and automatically adjust everything to deliver an immersive audio experience and spy on your every word.
Who knows about that? But yeah, so this
Come on.
all seems to go with the MediaTek Pentonic chip. They actually mentioned that this is like dependent on that particular processing chip. So I'm wondering if there might be a possibility that the handful of TVs that came out this year that use the newest MediaTek Pentonic chips, maybe they will be able to be firmware updated to work with this. But it's pretty certain that anything that isn't using a MediaTek Pentonic chip is not going to be compatible with this unless they specifically add it to their television. So like LG, for example, doesn't use the Pentonic chips, but they've been very strong partners with Dolby. So if LG's 2024 TVs were to come out and support Flex Connect, it wouldn't be a shock to me. It's just that they would have to add that specifically to their televisions. So yeah, this year we've got Sony's A95L flagship quantum dot OLEDs. That's the only Sony's using the new Pentonic chips. So they don't mention Flex Connect here in 2023, but I'm thinking there's a possibility that might get a firmware update to add that functionality when that comes out in 2024. TCL, Hisense, and Panasonic are the other TV manufacturers I know of. Philips over in Europe as well that are using those Pentonic chips. So yeah, it is somewhat interesting. I mean, this is still relying on the built-in speakers of the television to handle the front sound stage, but there are plenty of televisions that decode and pseudo playback Atmos as it is right now from the built-in speakers. So yeah, this is, just to fill in behind you and beside you with 2 wireless speakers that you can put back there at the back of the room. Then it'll send out some test tones during the calibration. Microphone built into the TV and set all that up automatically for you. Look, it's not going to have great bass. It is not going to have good subwoofer bass. You are going to be missing that. This does not have physically upward firing drivers. I mean, some of the Panasonic TVs have physically upward firing drivers in the TV itself, but other than that, it's going to be the pseudo-acoustic, psychoacoustic effect of trying to convince you the virtualized effect of the sounds coming from overhead. So
it feels like another in a long line of technologies over many years that are designed to just make a TV sound bigger.
sure. I mean,
just to give you some space in your smaller room. It's supposed to make it sound bigger. Ooh, the sound is coming from everywhere.
On the plus side, it'll maybe make a handful more people aware of Atmos. I'm never against that. On the minus side, if this is someone's first experience of Atmos, I'm not thinking they're really getting the top flight quality version of Atmos. So yeah, double-edged sword there. But whatever, that's what they're doing. So
I mean, I'm not
There
going
it
to
is.
say
Flex Connect.
if you can't have overhead speakers, don't worry
I
about
know.
Atmos. But I'm kind of saying that.
Yeah, pretty close to it. Yeah, I'm right about
Because
there.
we already have 5.1 and you have 2 ears and,
That's
you
right.
know, I don't know. I just, it's so frustrating. I get a little Tomish when it comes to this sort of thing. I'm like, man, also I wonder if you clip the wires going to the microphone, would the whole TV pretend to not work? I'm just
I have
paranoid.
no idea.
Anyway, you mentioned LG. Lastly here, LG has announced they'll be introducing a new 32-inch OLED screen size next year. It seems to mainly be targeted for use as a computer monitor, but it might show up as a TV size option as well. We didn't work out the math to know for sure, but we're wondering if that might be a small enough screen size to be made from the same piece of mother glass as the 97-inch panels. That would improve efficiency and substantially reduce waste material if possible, similar to how the 48-inch size is made along with 77-inch panels, and the 42 size is made along with the 83-inch panels. So I guess that's turned 90 degrees or something on the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
giant-
So it's a multimodal manufacturing because, of course, the
Mm-hmm.
pixel pitch is different. The pixels are much, much closer together on the smaller screen sizes.
Mm-hmm,
So that was a challenge for a long, long time in manufacturing, but they've managed to work out that on a single gigantic piece of mother glass, they're able to cut multiple different sizes of televisions and have those different pixel pitches as they go along. So right now, LG still has two 8.5 generation plants for manufacturing OLEDs. And so the physical size of the mother glass is limited there. They've been working away on building a 10.5 generation plant for OLEDs, but that's been delayed and delayed and delayed. So at present, when they make one of the 97 inches, that is the only display made out of that piece of mother glass, which is why it's $25,000.
Why, good Lord.
And there's a fair amount of waste material that comes out of that because the 97-inch is not the entire size of the piece of mother glass. So there's a fair amount of glass just going to waste. So that's why if they can make even smaller screen sizes and somehow work the geometry out that it fits in, and they can now make more screens out of that piece of mother glass instead of that amount of waste material. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we've seen the 77-inch and the 83-inch screen sizes come down in price
Yes.
quite noticeably.
Shockingly, yeah.
And it's because they were able to fit those 48 and 42-inch sizes respectively onto that same piece of mother glass. So the 32-inch, whether that's going to fit with the 97, I'm not quite sure, but fingers crossed, because I would love to see those 97 inches come down in price a bit.
Don't think I haven't just sort of lightly floated the 77-inch OLED idea.
Oh, yes.
Just kind of mentioned that, oh man, those things really are getting cheaper.
They're getting kind of reasonable.
That'd be the next step up, wouldn't it? And then, don't just kind of stop there. Just throw the idea out into the room, you know what I'm saying? Just to see what might happen. So I might still be a little nervous with a computer monitor as an OLED. I guess there's still that fear built into my head of burn-in, because in a computer situation, there is a lot of very static elements on the screen for long periods of time, and I just don't know about that. But boy, it would be beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would, talk about accurate color. And if you're editing photos and stuff, I think if you went through some effort to minimize your static elements on the screen, that might be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But time to move on to some comments that we got, and then we'll get to questions. So comments here. First, from Matt in the UK, wanted to let us know how much he appreciated our discussion about the dialogue intelligibility issues he was having after switching from a soundbar to a 5.1 speaker system with an AV receiver. His center speaker was indeed below the TV inside a TV stand. That's my situation too. All he did was move the center speaker onto an open shelf above the TV, and voila, it made a big difference. So he's very thankful for our help. I could try something like that. I've got nothing above the TV to sit it on.
Right.
I'd have to temporarily rig up something to see if that made a difference, because I complain a little bit here and there about dialogue.
Yeah.
But also, two things. One, there's that whole trend lately where dialogue is buried in the mix in so many movies. If it's an action movie or something, sci-fi movie like I like, there's a lot of music and sound effects that literally do drown out vocals. And then other thing is, I'm getting older and I didn't know if it was just me.
That's right. That can happen too.
And the speakers are getting kind of old too. And so I used to have my center speaker sitting on top of a stand in front of the TV, not on a shelf. And so maybe the first thing is just pull it out and try it for a few days sitting on top of the stand, but then it might cut off part of the screen. So
yeah,
it's just hard
temporary stuff. Yeah.
It's hard to test, but that's very nice that Matt had that effect. And that's another thing I can't impress upon people enough is that sometimes just moving speakers makes
that was
all
our
the
suggestion.
difference.
Yeah, because
right?
we went from the soundbar where he wasn't having the problem. So we're like, okay, that makes me think it's a little bit less of it's the reflection off the back wall, just intrinsically. We didn't know what speaker he's using, so that wasn't out of the question. But I'm like, it's pretty common that the sound bar was like directly below the TV or directly above the TV, and then you get the larger physical center speaker, and the only place it seems to make sense is like inside of the TV stand, maybe a little bit recessed. You get that cupped effect that makes everything sound like a lot of vowels and a lot less consonants. That makes the intelligibility much worse. So I was like, yeah, if that's the case, give it a try. He was like, yep, that kind of sounds like me. Let's see what happens. And so just physically moving the speaker made a big difference.
I might need to try that sometime. Although I do have mine pulled as far forward as it can.
Right.
The grill sticks out beyond the front plane of the stand. But I should try that sometime. All right. Now, Jim has a comment. Wanted to mention that if you want an AirPlay source device for each zone, you can still find used Apple Airport Expresses for well under $100. So they're still a good option with both a stereo analog and an optical digital audio output. Jim also suggested that if you cannot wait for a better physical disc release of True Lies, there's a Blu-ray version from Spain that is region-free and includes the English language soundtrack. That is an interesting option for a very specific problem.
People are waiting on those Jim Cameron movies, so if you just can't wait, there it is.
I mean, there you go. I hope that helps someone. If that helps you, let us know. I want to know if we just hit that perfect thing for somebody. Also, Greg has a comment. He wanted to mention that if you're a AAA member in the USA, you can get 20% off of Samsung TVs, including their flagship QD OLED models. 20% off is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
They might want to just join AAA for that and then cancel it.
Kind of the thing, yeah.
How much is that? I don't know. In particular, he wanted to point out that with the AAA discount, the 77-inch Samsung S90C QD OLED comes in cheaper than even the clearance LG C2 OLEDs. And the 77-inch size uses the exact same panels as the more expensive S95C series, with reviewers saying the picture quality is essentially identical. So that model in particular is a really good deal. That's kind of what a weird way to get a pretty substantial discount, right?
Well, that's why he wanted to mention it, because it's not something I would think of to look up. So he's like, hey,
now how
out.
much is a AAA membership?
That's right.
To go look at that for just a hot second and
Absolutely.
See, like, how long do I have to have the membership before I can use that discount? Can I get the membership, buy the TV, cancel the membership, and get my money back?
You wanted a 77-inch. This would be a quantum dot OLED.
Yeah, but you still do have to pay something for it.
Yeah,
so that would be interesting, though, but that's going to take a while. I'm just planting the seeds of 77-inch OLED right now. That's all. Just planting the seeds. I did that with the car years ago, just kind of started dropping those ideas. So anyway, let's do some questions on this. This question answering show that we have that helps people with their AV issues. From last week, John had a question. John dug into the absorption panel calculators over at acousticmodeling.com and seemingly fell down the rabbit hole a bit. Well, there's so many rabbit holes to fall down nowadays. His goal is to build 6 large panels 3 feet by 6 feet.
Yeah.
He discovered Acoustic Modeling's multi-layer absorber calculator and came up with 3 designs, 2 variations for mid and treble absorption that he would put on his side and back walls for mid-treble panels, and a 3rd design for a bass trap that he would put close to his front speakers, 2 bass trap panels. The mid-treble panels would have 3 inches of insulation, then a 1/2-inch slotted panel, then another 3 inches of insulation, and a 1/2-inch air gap, 7 inches deep in total. Or he also tried a configuration with 4 inches of insulation, then a 1-inch perforated panel, then 2 inches of insulation, then a 1-inch air gap, 8 inches deep. in total.
Yes.
Woo, okay.
Both of which would normally be considered bass traps. So he's like, that's just my mid-treble panels. But yeah, I'm not... He didn't give any details on how exactly he landed on those designs. I'm thinking he must have come across something like that on a forum somewhere, because that isn't something you just come up with on your own out of whole cloth.
We're rocketing down the rabbit hole now.
I'm not exactly sure where all that came from. But yes, if you go to acousticmodeling.com, you can plug in the figures for a multi-layer sandwich-style absorption panel, and you can see it in graph form. You can see it in chart form, where it gives you the figures of how much the absorption coefficient will be, the reflection coefficient. So yeah, you can see all those figures.
And he has included said charts and figures. It is very detailed and very rabbit hole-ish. The bass trap panels would have 2 inches of insulation, then a 1-inch perforated panel, then 5 inches of insulation, then a 2-inch air gap, 10 inches deep in total. And then he has additional charts going along with that.
That's right.
He's wondering if all of the calculated figures for the absorption coefficient, reflection coefficient, normalized impedance, and all that look good, and if he should proceed. Multi-layer versus just 7 inches, 2 by 3.5 inch, or 2 times 3.5 inches.
So I
of
did
insulation.
just a note. I worked this out because I just to go back to his question before we dig into the parts that I came up with. So I mean, if we go back to the first 2 panels, the 7-inch thick panel and the 8-inch thick panel that he came up with, calling it mid-treble panels. Like I say, these effectively are bass traps at those types of thicknesses. But I mean. So if you're looking at the graphs, I mean, what's important is the absorption coefficient. That's the most important thing when it comes to any of these panels. And whether you're looking at the graphs that come out of it or looking at the absorption coefficient and reflection coefficient, I mean, those are going to be inverses of each other. If the absorption coefficient goes up, then the reflection coefficient is going to go down, and vice versa. So, I mean, what you have here is at certain frequencies, because, I mean, it's either a slotted panel or a perforated panel with certain slot sizes, widths, or certain perforation hole sizes in there. I mean, at some frequencies, you get this, like, I'm not going to say a boost in reflectance. I'm going to say a lowering of absorption at certain frequencies, just given that slotted panel or that perforated panel. And I don't know why the heck you would want that. It doesn't. It doesn't make sense to me that you'd want uniformity from non-uniformity from frequency to frequency. Furthermore, despite the first panel that he tried being 7 inches deep in total versus the second panel that he tried being 8 inches deep in total, the 7-inch depth is actually a better absorber across a wider range of frequencies, because that perforated panel that he slotted in there really has this wiggle-inducing effect on what's being absorbed versus reflected there. So I mean, in a sense, if you really are just focusing on 1 kilohertz and above, having that perforated panel slotted in there makes it a worse bass absorber, but I don't know why you would want to do that in any what we would call acoustically small space, which is any room in a house. You can't overdo your bass trapping. So the only reason you would do this is if you have very, very specific needs that it doesn't make a lick of sense why you would do this. So that's why I basically wanted to say, okay, first of all, the panels you've come up with would require many cuts, right? You'd have to make cuts in the insulation to get them exactly those sizes. You'd have to either purchase or create these slotted or perforated panels that have to be the thickness that you've calculated to get those very specific results. It doesn't make a lick of sense to me. So that's where I just slotted in. Okay, what if you just took off the shelf 3.5-inch thick bats of insulation? Because I mean, there's plenty of 3.5-inch thick bats of insulation that are just meant to go in standard 2x4 studs, right? So what if you just took 2 of those, put them back to back? That's 7 inches deep right there. No air gap, no panel, no nothing, just 7 inches of insulation.
Simple.
What if you just did that? And comparing the graph of that, it's actually a slightly better panel than the mid-treble sandwich one that he came together that was also 7 inches deep.
It's a lot
the exact
smoother
same width.
chart.
It's a whole lot smoother. It's much more uniform, and it even absorbs slightly lower in frequency than the sandwich panel. it doesn't make any sense to me why you would go to all the trouble of cutting materials, making a sandwich when you can just buy off the shelf, ready to go in 2x4 studs. You're just putting two of those bats face to face and putting it in, basically a 1x8, right? A 1x8 would be perfect in terms of the depth, and you're done. It's so much simpler to construct.
At least he knows he might be down the rabbit hole, and
I think so.
Let's just go ahead and tell him to climb on out.
That's right.
You're making so much more work for yourself.
Yeah.
For no gain, and in fact, maybe getting worse. And don't forget, you're making your room smaller. These are huge, deep panels.
Yes.
Don't overdo it.
And I'm thinking he must have seen someone who was swearing by this on a forum or something somewhere. I mean, look, if you went from no panels to these multi-layer panels, you're going to hear an improvement.
Yeah.
Sure. Why you would want manufactured non-uniformity in your absorption from frequency to frequency makes no sense. So then worse than that is this 10-inch thick bass trap multi-layer thing, because if we're looking at the graph of this is supposed to be a bass trap, and with the design that is calculated, I'm like, yeah, it's a very effective absorber at about 200 hertz, but then it's considerably worse at absorbing up at 500 hertz. And it's like, it doesn't make, again, it just doesn't make any sense why you would build this as your bass trap. If we then go to another comparison that I did, which was, you know what I did? Still just 2 layers of 3.5-inch thick insulation, still 7 inches of that, and then putting it in a 1x10, which is not actually 10 inches deep, right? It's 9.25 inches deep when you're talking about a 1x10 as your frame material. So all I'm doing is 7 inches of insulation, 2 3.5-inch bats, standard bats, face to face, and then the remaining 2.25 inches as an air gap. And all of a sudden, we have a way better bass trap that is much better as a bass trap, just performance-wise, better as a bass trap, and then so much easier to construct. You don't have to cut the frame at all because you're just buying 1x10s, or 2x10s would be fine too if you can't find 1x10s that are sturdy and straight enough. Just standard lumber, no cuts other than the lengths, to make it 3 feet by 6 feet, and then just standard insulation. And in fact, I would say, let's not go for exactly 3 feet wide. Let's get 16-inch on center bats of insulation and put them side by side.
There you go.
Because that's almost 3 feet, right?
Right.
So I'm like, let's just make this simple. You're building these yourself. Let's do as few cuts as possible.
Right.
Let's get standard 3.5-inch thick, 16-inch on center insulation. You might have to do one set of cuts to get the 6-foot height, but that's so much simpler. That's like a single straight cut going across.
Right. So
you're literally just cutting the standard 4-foot high insulation bats in half into squares and adding those to get your 6-foot height. I've made this so much simpler and better. Performance-wise better.
I mean, you can't argue with
simpler.
Easier and better. John, please just step away from the simulator for a minute.
Yeah. So,
and I'm noticing that Bass Trap 1 chart has this weird harmonic regularity where it absorbs and doesn't absorb.
Yes.
It's like almost even mathematical multiples, and that's going to be their software doing things, showing you that strange graph. So most definitely don't overdo this. Just stop looking at this thing and do what Rob just said.
I mean, that's the only advice that I can offer. That's the only sense that makes to me.
I mean,
if you know of a really specific reason why it has to be this non-uniform, altering between being better absorbing and worse absorbing, more reflecting, if there's a really specific reason, I'm okay for hearing it, but to me it just doesn't make a lick of sense.
There's not a reason.
I'm thinking this is someone who is really proud of what they built and talked about it on a forum, and like I say, it's going to be way better than not having any panels, but it could have been so much simpler.
I readily admit that I'm a guy who has literally hung a bedspread on a wall.
Sure.
So you don't have to listen to me, but Rob's definitely making sense. He's making it better and simpler. And I understand, I respect when somebody wants to, let's just go crazy on this.
Well, I have no problem using the tool to simulate it. It's great to learn about it, what's going to happen.
I understand, if you want to spend, say, find it fun and you want to spend some time in, let's go to the 99.999% best thing I can do because I got the time. I know how to build stuff. But no, this is definitely a rabbit hole overdoing it. So back it down. All right, a couple more from him. He's got a TCL R635 TV. For 4K, that TV tops out at 60 hertz, but it can take a 1080p 120 signal. He's got an NVIDIA Shield, and if you unlock its developer mode, you can set it to allow 120 hertz output. Are those two things a good match?
It
would do it.
Yeah, the NVIDIA Shield, it is an HDMI 2.0 port that it has on there. Hardware-wise, it is limited to 18 gigabits per second.
Mm-hmm.
So it technically can output a 4K 120 signal, but it would have to be limited to 8-bit, not 10 or 12-bit, and it would have to use 420 chroma subsampling. There is absolutely no way to send a higher bandwidth signal than that hardware-wise through the NVIDIA Shield. Now, that is all moot for John's R635 because it can't take 4K 120 anyway.
Right.
But in terms of what can the NVIDIA Shield Pro do right now, yeah, theoretically it can output 4K 120, but like I say, with limitations. So essentially no HDR, because it would be limited to 8-bit and 420, so you couldn't do HDR at the same time. But they do have support for 1080p 120. That is an option that you can output from the NVIDIA Shield that would match the capabilities of your R635 TV. It can take a 1080p 120 signal. The only question is, why?
Yeah.
Why would you? Because there are no video services whatsoever that would make use of it. So it would strictly be for some games.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be a really, really limited number of games that would support it. Because one other thing, the NVIDIA Shield can be used as like a streaming device. If you have a high-end gaming computer, so you're gaming, kind of like the PlayStation Portal thing, a similar idea. If you have a high-end PC, gaming PC, and that's doing all the heavy lifting, you can use the NVIDIA Shield basically just as a streaming device to take what your PC is doing game-wise and put that onto your television, just acting.
Sure.
As a network streaming device, but that functionality is limited to 4K 60 in terms of streaming it from your gaming PC. So there's essentially no good reason to really do this. There's not gonna. I mean, I think there are one or two Android games that do 120, but yeah, it's really slim pickings. So basically, the NVIDIA Shield was designed to be a 4K 60 device, and there's not really any incentive to go beyond that as far as frame rate.
I agree with you. He's still using an Outlaw Audio Model 976 Pre-Pro. Can that pass through 120 hertz signals? He's really stuck on this 120 hertz situation.
Well, yeah, it's curiosity, but that is a flat no. The Outlaw Audio 976 just cannot do 120 of any resolution. It just full stop cannot do 120 hertz. It stops at 60.
All right, but can the new TCL Q7 series, which seems like the most direct replacement for the old 6 series, do 4K 120 and do it well?
Yes, it can. In fact, it's one of the newer breed that can even go up to 4K 144.
144?
If you really want it to, yes. If you got the gaming PC that can go up to 144 hertz, it can even accept that with full variable refresh rate.
Well, that's a lot better than 120.
Oh, sure. It's a higher number. There is a limitation, though, which is that the TCL Q7 series, it does decode Dolby Vision, but Dolby Vision specifically tops out at 4K 60 on the Q7 series. It cannot do Dolby Vision at 4K 120. So that is the single limitation as far as that goes. But yeah, in terms of doing 4K HDR, not Dolby Vision, at 120 or 144 with variable refresh rate, it supports all that and does it well.
All right. There you go. I hope that answered everything. Just chill, man. Chill. Hey, Infinite Gary!
Of course. It's like we knew you were coming. We had to save it for you, Lee.
Yeah, have to. Infinite Gary, fantastic. Regarding Oppenheimer's upcoming disc release, being a Christopher Nolan movie, Blu-ray.com, blue-ray.com, indicates that it's going to be a 5.1 DTS HD master audio soundtrack, no Atmos or DTS-X.
Correct.
That said, it seems like the sort of movie where some overhead effects might have made a lot of sense because bombs explode overhead. And with clever mixing, you can still get the illusion of sounds coming from overhead, even with just a 5.1 mix.
You sure can.
So does Rob recall any sounds in the IMAX presentation that made him look up? Something that maybe the DTS Neural X up mixer might throw into the overhead speakers?
So I did mention this when I did my little short review on this podcast when I saw the IMAX presentation, which was I did specifically notice a sound, and this is like in a handful of scenes before the Trinity test explosion actually takes place and the tension is really building. And I very much noticed this almost staticky, higher pitched sound that I hadn't really ever heard another movie use before to build tension. Like, we're very used to the low frequency effects, deep bass rumble coming in to build the tension. And this is like one of the first times I'm like, oh, they used like a much higher pitched sound, but it was very effective. It really got you on edge. It got me very tense.
So some sort of crispy, irritating sound.
Yeah, like I don't want to say it's the Geiger counter sound, because it's definitely not. It's almost more like that, that just sort of like outdoor ambience tone sound that you sometimes get, that little bit staticky, out in a wheat field type of sound that they sometimes put in there. It's closer to that.
That's the radiation you're hearing.
Well, that's what it wasn't. The Geiger counter sound.
No, not the Geiger counter. It's the radiation itself.
Well,
it's sizzling in the sky.
In any event, I thought it was very effective, and I very much did actually physically look up, because I noticed it coming specifically from the center height speaker, which is a speaker somewhat unique to the IMAX presentation. The IMAX presentation has 6 full range channels, one of which is a center height above that very tall IMAX screen, and that particular sound seemed to be locked coming from that channel. And I don't know what the experience. I haven't seen Oppenheimer again in a regular theater. I don't know what the experience of that sound is in an auditorium that doesn't have a center height speaker. So I don't know what they're going to do with the home mix, if they're going to do any sort of psychoacoustic effect, matrixing type of effect, or anything like that to try and make it sound like that particular sound effect is physically elevated or not, or if they're just going to have it come out of the center speaker, or maybe they're going to mix it into the surrounds. I don't know what they're going to do for the home mix, but that is, I actually noticed, that sound was coming from above, not directly overhead, but from that center height speaker. It was really because it was a high-pitched sound, it was quite directional. You could tell where that sound was coming from.
Interesting that it stood out for you that much.
Yeah.
That's really cool. What about the dialogue intelligibility like we've been talking about? Gary has seen reviews complaining about scenes where the loud music drowned out what was being said. Christopher Nolan likes that sort of thing. Is he going to need to boost his center speaker? Is he going to need to turn on the subtitles? Let me just answer one thing. In my opinion, if they mix a movie such that I can't hear it very well, my assumption is I don't need to hear the dialogue very well.
And I mean, Christopher Nolan certainly feels that way. Right. As a director, he does that intentionally.
Supposedly, the exact words being said aren't that important if someone like Christopher Nolan mixes it thus. So I'm not turning on a subtitle to watch a movie.
Okay.
I have a pretty decent system, and if I can't hear what's being said, I'm just going to guess you wanted me to focus more on the noise.
And there's definitely some of that, with many Christopher Nolan movies. Now, again, this is one, I've seen those reviews, and my parents went and saw Oppenheimer just in a large format, but not IMAX theater. Now, my dad has hearing loss anyway, so we can't really, he always struggles to hear dialogue no matter how clear it is. That's just, unfortunately, his hearing situation. But my mom still has quite good hearing. She does not, in fact, whenever she goes to a movie, she ends up, putting little bits of Kleenex in her ears to tone it down a little bit, because she finds it too loud. Any concert
I go to, I stick these little sound-absorbing things in my ears.
That's right.
Has a tiny little hole in it to pass through some of the sound.
That's right.
So it doesn't cut out all the trouble. So I can't remember what the brand name is.
The Eddie Modic earplugs that I like very much, because they're very good at not changing the frequency balance too much, but they just attenuate everything overall to bring it back down to a safe measure. But both. So, like I say, my dad always struggles to hear dialogue, so that was expected. But my mom was definitely complaining, it wasn't loud enough. It was too loud. But she was like, yeah, sometimes the music was just overpowering the dialogue. Now, in the IMAX presentation that I saw, I didn't find that to be the case, and I would say so, because I saw The Dark Knight or Dark Knight Rises in IMAX, and muffled Bane was muffled. I saw Interstellar in IMAX, and there were huge swaths of that movie where it's I have no idea what was just said. You got that organ just absolutely blasting the heck out of everybody, and I can't tell anything that's going on. I didn't find that to be the case with Oppenheimer and IMAX. I never felt that I missed a line of dialogue. I think there were certainly times when there was a cacophony of sound and dialogue happening at the same time.
Right.
That is definitely the case. But I heard the dialogue clearly. I never went, what did they just say?
Then that must be Nolan's choice in this particular situation, because it's not a sound effects movie, as I understand it, right? There's only a little bit about the bomb itself.
Well, I mean, there's that. I mean, there are other scenes where he's thinking about it beforehand and then remembering it afterwards, and you get some of those very deep bass effects at those times too. But it's not so much the bass thing. It's going to be the music. It's going to be the score that overpowers it sometimes. Right. So, look, I can see it being the case in something that maybe isn't as finely tuned and calibrated as an IMAX theater, because there definitely are the scenes where the score is very, very loud at the same time as dialogue. And, you know, my mom, as a person who said it directly to me, she's like, yeah, I absolutely could not tell what people were saying sometimes. So hopefully the home mix is going to be closer to the IMAX presentation, be a little bit clearer. But yeah, that was the experiences that I had.
I mean, if they do it right, they should, convert it to work best in a home theater situation, because
there's going to be a home remix.
I mean, there's only so many good IMAX theaters that can have that amazing top tier experience for people. Right. So you can't mix only for that. So hopefully they take that into account. But because it seems to be a purposeful decision to make dialogue hard to hear, I just let myself miss a few lines. And I assume I'm going to get what's going on. And generally I do. So okay. Let's move on to Matt. Matt is sprucing up his home theater room. It's about 15 feet wide by 18 feet deep, and it's got plush carpet over the entire floor. It has a drop tile ceiling, and the joist bays above that are empty at the moment. If he were to fill those joist bays with insulation, would that act as a bass trap? Would he still need vertical corner bass traps as well? It's definitely going to help.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's a good idea regardless, although, of course, there's cost involved. But yeah, so, I mean, the main thing is you will get some bass trapping effect no matter what, because, of course, with a drop tile ceiling, that is not like some sort of airtight seal whatsoever. Right. But if you have the normal sort of plastic, quite reflective drop ceiling tiles, it's not going to be the best at passing those sound waves through to get to that insulation. Like, there are going to be gaps. Air is going to move around those plastic ceiling tiles. You will get some bass trapping effect, but it would be more effective if you have acoustic ceiling tiles and then additional insulation above that.
That would be the first thing I would do, because that sounds worth it.
It is worth it. I mean, that once you have that, if your entire ceiling is acoustic ceiling tiles, and in your case, if you're going to be doing this, you don't have to get the thicker, more expensive acoustic ceiling tiles. You just have to get normal, like 1 inch or even half-inch thick acoustic ceiling tiles, and then have a nice amount of insulation above that. Get the super cheap stuff, the stuff that you put above a garage, the white fluffy stuff, doesn't even have to be the pink stuff, the even cheaper stuff to fill up those floor joist bays, because the thicker the better. Although honestly, once you go beyond about 8 inches, you start getting very much diminishing returns in terms of that. So, but if you can get
discussed before,
that's right. So I mean, if you have the 1 inch acoustic ceiling tile and then about 7 inches of insulation above that you're going to be really, really well suited in terms of using that as a bass trap. Now, like we always say, acoustically small spaces, you basically can never overdo your bass trapping. So if you were to also do vertical corner bass traps, I don't think it would harm anything.
Okay. Sure.
But I would say at that point, if your entire ceiling has become a bass trap of that size, you will have cut down the overall room decay times to a very reasonable level, where I would not say you also need more bass trapping beyond that just to get to that nice, 300 to 400 millisecond overall RT60 time type of zone. You're going to be there if your whole ceiling is already treated.
That's so definitely acoustic tiles up there.
Yeah.
He already has 6 DIY absorption panels on hand, and he plans to reuse them. They are 2 feet by 4 feet and made from 1x4 lumber with rock wool.
Nice.
Should he build more panels, and if so, should he use 1x6 lumber this time and just use the extra depth as an air gap? We have talked about that mathematical relationship between the thickness of the insulation and the air gap behind it. Would that be a good idea for him? Would that make it any better?
Yeah, so
Or would it be worth the trouble?
Yeah, so this is on the assumption that you do end up treating the whole ceiling and making that into a very large base trap for your room. Now the panels would just be for specific reflections. So I would say, okay, you're going to put maybe 2 panels on each side wall, first reflection points on the side walls. Now, I mean, I would be quite comfortable having 3 or 4 panels across the front wall, 3 or 4 panels across the back wall. Like I say, you wouldn't really need to do a whole lot more base trapping in here. So, I mean, look, it's not going to hurt anything if you did 1x6 lumber this time. That's not going to be a problem. I would probably put those on either your front or your back wall. I would take the panels you already have. I put a couple on each side wall. That leaves you with, 2 panels that you already have on hand. So maybe you make upwards of 4 more panels. If you made them still out of 1x4, I don't think it's going to be a problem. Right. And yeah, depending on if you want to get your speakers, if your speakers are going to basically have the back of your speakers, I'm talking about your front speakers, your front, left, right, and center. If the back of your speakers are more or less going to be right against the panels that you have on your front wall, then having those be 4 inches deep or so is really all you need. If they're going to be maybe in that more difficult zone about 1 foot away from the wall, which is pretty typical, right? Oftentimes our front speakers are maybe about 1 foot from the back of the speaker to the wall. Then having the thicker deeper panels on the front wall would be beneficial. So maybe you make yourself 3 or 4 1x6 panels, you put them on your front wall, and I think you're done.
Right. So definitely the ceiling situation, better acoustic tiles, put the insulation up there, and then obviously just try what you have first.
Oh, yeah.
And see if you're inspired to do more.
Yeah, I don't think you need to go nuts here. I think you can save yourself a lot by doing the ceiling.
That's going to be great. Let's go on to a question from Yannick. Is it Yannick or Yannick?
I don't know. I say Yannick.
Yannick was using a JVC X790 1080p projector. It had eShift 5 to wobble the panels twice per frame when showing 4K content. He came across a good deal on a lamp-based JVC NX7, not the laser-based NZ7 or NZ7. So he snapped it up. Yeah. The NX7 has HDMI 2.0 inputs, just like his X790. So the main upgrades, at least on paper, would be the genuine 4K resolution panels, the optional DCI P3 color filter, and the frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping for HDR. The X790 actually had the higher contrast ratio spec and slightly deeper black levels. He dug into JVC's own calibration software, and he wanted to give a big shout out to Simple Home Cinema. They offer some free and many paid guides, and despite the name, JVC's AutoCal isn't actually so auto.
That is very true.
Yeah. Simple Home Cinema's guide for $6 really helped him out, where responses from the forums had just been confusing. So he thinks it's well worth it. But back to his new NX7. The thing is, he was already using an HD Fury Vertex that allowed him to use Dolby Vision on his X790. So despite being newer and more expensive, is the NX7 actually an upgrade? He's doing his own evaluation, of course, but what are our thoughts? That does seem like a good list of features that you didn't have before.
Yeah,
but contrast is contrast.
Yeah. I mean, look, the thing that I loved about the NX series when it came out really was that frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. That was the thing I loved. Now, so I mean, it already has the HD Fury Vertex. So that means he can take sources that do Dolby Vision low latency and convert that into a signal that the JVC still understands. Now, that does only actually apply changing tone mapping if it is Dolby Vision content. So there's still a lot of content that is not Dolby Vision. There's still a lot of HDR content that's HDR10. And even if you say played that through an Apple TV where it puts it into a Dolby Vision container, and you're thinking that's getting you the dynamic tone mapping that way, it isn't really, because it's just going to still be a static tone map. It's just been put into a Dolby Vision container at that point, and you aren't actually getting scene by scene changing metadata in that way. So there's some advantage there, right? For the HDR10 content, having the frame by frame dynamic tone mapping on the NX7 is still a bit of an advantage. But honestly, like when that NX series came out, it didn't do 4K 120. Which the NZ series now does, the NZ series now does. So it was like, yeah, the frame by frame dynamic tone mapping really was the thing. It was actually a small step back, get in terms of contrast and black level. The NX series, the last of the X7 series, X790 and X, I think there was a 990 and there was X590, I think. But I mean, those ones were like top of the pile in terms of outright black level and just native panel contrast. So I've never thought that going from the native 1080p resolution to the native 4K resolution was that big of a deal. That was never
unless
really
you're
the
sitting
thing.
very close with a very fine mesh screen.
So, my thought has been that if you had one of those final generation of the 1080p lamp-based models, that the real upgrade, if you were going to do it, was to go all the way to the NZ series, the NZ series, because now you're doing, HDMI 2.1 stuff that the last of the 1080p just absolutely couldn't handle whatsoever. Right. And then you got, something in addition to the frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping and the 4K resolution. So I always felt like the NX series were fantastic-looking projectors. But if you had one of the last 1080p's, I never really thought it was like, oh, you got to run out and get one. Like if you really want that 4K resolution, okay, that's kind of the reason you're doing it. Mm-hmm. And if you wanted that frame by frame dynamic tone mapping that I like most of all, that was a reason you could justify with it. But yeah, I'm thinking I'm very wishy-washy on this, right? I'm not thinking that the NX7 is better in every way type of thing. And if you're already got the system that you can put Dolby Vision on there and you're mostly watching Dolby Vision content, then the frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping is less of an advantage. And that X790 you had was a really, really good projector.
But he has already moved on.
I know.
He did get the NX7, and it's not like he's going to have some terrible experience compared to the previous one.
No, it was just a matter of...
It's more of a lateral move with different features you might like better.
Yeah, it's a change more than an upgrade. Gotcha. I think I could put it that way. And so that's why I was like, okay, if you're going to spend the money there, I'm like, do you just save for one of the I mean, even if it's an NP5, just so that you're getting more features than what going from the X790 to the NX7 did. So yeah. Yeah.
Well, he said he got a great deal, so maybe he can sell and move on in the future and really not be out
that's
a whole lot.
Yeah, that's kind
Put that
of
money
it. So
the next
honestly, he's doing his own evaluation. If he came back and he's like, you know what, I don't think or even if he's like, I actually think I preferred my X790, I'm like, you're not crazy. I will give you that confirmation. Yeah. Like, I'm right there with you. It's a little 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and not equal. It's like, this one's a little better in this area, the other one's a little better in that area, so I could make a case for either or.
Sure. He uses two screens, a 106-inch 16:9 and a 115-inch 2.35:1. Mm-hmm. As we've recently warned other 4K JVC projector owners, the genuine 4K models actually have the slightly wider 4096 by 2160 rather than the Ultra HD resolution of 3840 by 2160. Mm-hmm. So, what happens to those extra 256 pixels on the sides? What happens? It makes perfect sense for him that for 16:9 content on his 16:9 screen, he'd just use perfect 1-to-1 pixel mapping, and there'd be some blank pixels on the left and right edges. But on his 2.35:1 screen, should he still have unused blank pixels on the left and right, or should he use the projector's native resolution to expand the width to the full 4096 pixels? Would he get a little bit more light output from the projector that way?
So, I mean, technically a minuscule amount more, nothing honestly noticeable to the human eye. So greater light output wouldn't be the reason to do it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I've always been a bigger fan of, if you can do 1-to-1 pixel mapping, then I want to do 1-to-1 pixel mapping.
Always.
And all of your sources are coming out at a 16:9, 3840 by 2160 or 1920 by 1080 resolution that, of course, scales perfectly to 3840 by 2160. Mm-hmm. So I would leave this is me. I would leave the JVC projector in 16:9 mode at all times and just have perfect 1-to-1 pixel mapping, because if you go to the native panel resolution, you are zooming in and scaling the image slightly. You're getting away from 1-to-1 perfect pixel mapping, and you're slightly scaling and slightly zooming in the image. Now, the scaling is really good, so do I honestly think that's going to be some kind of gigantic detriment? No. Yeah, to me, it just makes more sense to stick with the 1-to-1 pixel mapping. So if you do that, if you go with that advice, then there will always be some blank image on the left and right. Some of those 256 pixels in total on the left and right sides, 128 on either side, are just going to be blank. They're just going to be black bars at all times, all times, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. I can tell you from the Photoshop world, and even some from the editing of video, that the closer the two resolutions you're trying to convert between, the worse the results.
Well, yeah, because you only have a very small number of pixels to interpolate new information in between. Yeah. So,
it's like if you're doing an even dividing number, it's much better than if you're dividing by something that's very close. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to Jason's question. Jason appreciated Rob and Lee discussing what happened when Bell Media in Canada tried to install a new Fibe TV box in place of his satellite TV box, but ran into problems with Jason's HD Base T extender. I do remember this. And I remember I said fiber at first because I thought that was a typo.
That's right, of course.
But it is Fibe. We speculated that since picture and sound did make it to his TV through the HD Base T extender, but the image was all green or otherwise had messed up colors, perhaps it's somehow just a pinout problem, where the Fibe TV box is using a different HDMI pin configuration than the HD Base T converter. Is there some way to easily test that? And quick extra note here, Josh in a YouTube video comment suggested making sure the Fibe TV box isn't set to output Dolby Vision, as some setups that don't support DV and use the HDR10 base layer instead end up with green or purple images.
Yeah, so that's definitely worth a check. I'm not even sure if the particular Fibe TV box that Jason got has a Dolby Vision option, but if it does, definitely turn it off, because that's certainly an easy enough setting to check. And if that fixes the problem, fantastic.
Magic. Yeah, that would be great.
That would have been great. But in terms of testing, I mean, look, there are, signal testers from Meridio that can do this, but there's thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And so for a one-time use, there would make no sense to purchase or even rent if you can. It wouldn't really make a ton of sense. So, I mean, honestly, the test that you already did is kind of the only way you can do this, which is you take the new Fibe TV box, you plug it directly into your television and confirm that works, which it did. Then you use that very same HDMI cable that you just used, plug that straight into your HD Base T converter.
There you go.
Then, of course, your HD Base T converter connects to your television through the Ethernet cord. And if that doesn't work, then it's an indication that, I mean, even if it's not a physical pin, there's something in the signaling that is going awry, right? If the signal can make it from the Fibe TV box through that very same HDMI cord directly to the TV and that works, then whatever is going on with the HD Base T converter is to blame. And I'm not exactly sure what it is, but
I can't imagine what it would be, but that would clearly be it if that's the results you get swapping between the two. A little bit more from him. Since connecting the new TV box directly to the TV worked fine, we suggested it might be time to replace the HD Base T converter with just a long HDMI cable. I would agree with that. But unfortunately, he doesn't have any conduit run inside his walls, and he really doesn't want to deal with a whole new cable run and patching walls and all that.
Fair enough.
That said, could we suggest a long HDMI cable option and perhaps also a newer HD Base T converter that might allow him to get things working without having to replace any cables? And you betcha.
Yeah, so I mean, for the HD Base T converter, I'm going to point you to Cable Matters version. It's relatively affordable. It's $120 for the conversion system, and it is the highest spec that HD Base T goes to, which is HDMI 2.0. There are no HDMI 2.1 HD Base T converters as of yet, but this is right up to HDMI 2.0. It does work with some length limitations over a Cat5e cable. They recommend a Cat6 cable for the Ethernet cable itself, but it will still work over Cat5e just with some length limitations. And it is still I think it was 110 or 120 feet that'll work over Cat5e. So chances are you're shorter than that, and it would probably be fine. I'm just thinking if what he ran inside his walls was Cat5e, then you don't want, then you're in the same situation where you're having.
But if there was a subtle problem with what's inside the walls, you'd also want to make sure you had on hand some other Ethernet to run across the room first.
Yeah, to test. So those are just some of the things there. But yeah, basically, if that one doesn't work, then I think it would be time to find a way to make a long HDMI cable work. So these days, I'm pointing to RuiPro's fiber optic HDMI cables. These are HDMI 2.1, 48 gigabits per second, and RuiPro in particular, because they are CL2 in-wall rated. So if you do end up running it inside the wall, this is one of the few fiber optic ones that's HDMI 2.1 bandwidth that is in-wall rated, and that's important because many of the fiber optic cables are not in-wall rated. So yeah, pretty reasonably priced, like 50 feet of the fiber optic one is about $103, $104 from Amazon, and it's like, as you go to the 65 foot is like $110, so they're not overcharging you for the extra length because it's just fiber optic cable.
Right, so cheap.
So, yeah, the 40-footer I think is $99. So
okay,
they're right. They're all in that sort of $100 price range. Whatever.
I forget how far is his run. Do we remember?
I never actually knew the exact length.
Okay,
but,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, then that would be something interesting to know too. But yeah, one of those things is bound to do what he wants. Just remember, stay scientific and just change one thing at a time.
Definitely.
To see where the problem is. All right, here comes a question from Tyler. Tyler says he has slowly been converting a spare bedroom into a dedicated home theater. His next project is making some DIY absorption panels. That's such a good project for everyone getting into home theater, I think. DIY panel. What a satisfying result, too. It's not too hard to build. I just love when I hear people building them. For panels going on the side walls, would it create some sort of problem if the panels on the left wall are thicker than the panels on the right wall? One side of his room is a walkway, so he can't have the panels sticking out too far. He was planning to use 1x3s with 2-inch insulation, but on the other side, he could potentially make the panels thicker, maybe using 1x5s with 4-inch insulation. He could maybe just barely get away with 1x4s on the walkway side. And after we mentioned it, he plugged the numbers into the calculator at acousticmodeling.com, where you can lose your mind, and saw that just that 1 extra inch seemed to make quite a difference. He wanted to ask us before making any cuts, what do we say he should do? If you can get away with the 1x4s on the walkway side,
then just 1x4s on both sides.
Yeah.
Now everything's easy, parallel, no cuts to your insulation. You just get the 3.5-inch regular bats of insulation. You don't have to get the exactly 2-inch or exactly 4-inch.
I mean, what's a bruise on your shoulder every now and then because you weren't paying attention?
Bevel the edges. You're doing it DIY. Bevel the edges, the outside edges of the...
get you a little router tip that makes a nice curved edge.
Can we really not scooch the seats 1 inch?
That's what I'm wondering, but some people just don't want something sticking out where you're used to walking. It feels like you're going to run into it, and
if we're saying that it has to be 1x3s instead of 1x4s for the walkway, I'm like, no, you can move your seats 1 inch. I'm sure you can.
Yeah, it's not going to make a big difference. Yeah.
So my inclination would be to just do 1x4, everything 1x4s, not differences. It's fewer cuts, it's more standard material, easier to get a hold of. Less expensive material. So I think that's the way to go here. And scoot your seats 1 inch if you really need to for that walkway.
Even if you have to scooch 3/4 of an inch.
That's right.
Just scooch a little bit. Gotta have some scooch room.
I'm sure.
Does it have squishy armrests? Then just smash it up against whatever the problem is. It's fine. But yeah, OCD says 1x4s everywhere.
Yeah.
All right. Finally, we can do at least some new questions for this week.
We got through what was left over last week.
This very strange natural disaster week. Galen has a new question for this week. Is now the right time for him to upgrade his Epson 8350 projector? Yeah, sure, go for it. Next question. Oh, wait, he has more. He's had it for about 10 years and just recently replaced the bulb with a third-party lamp. He has noticed there's a bit of a halo of light spill on the right side, some of which gets onto the screen itself, washing out the image a bit on the right edge. He was considering getting a refurbished 5050 UB directly from Epson. They're going for about $2,100 these days, and that's right around the max budget he's willing to spend. But he isn't sure he wants to spend that much on a refurb unit that was built 5 years ago. Is there a newer, better 4K projector model he should consider instead? Should we answer that question first?
Oh, let's go through the whole thing because it all becomes germane to this. Yeah.
All right, all together. So that's question one there is there a newer, better 4K projector he should consider? Also, his receiver is a Denon X3000, so it only has HDMI 1.4 and does not have HDCP 2.2. Therefore, no modern 4K signals can pass through it, and HDR is definitely out of the question. For sources, he just has a regular 1080p Blu-ray player and either a Google TV device or a Roku. So, does he wait for his 8350's bulb to burn out again? Wait for this halo defect to get worse? Wait for the projector to croak entirely? Or go ahead and upgrade now? So I think you have at least found him a projector that might fit the bill.
Yeah, I've got two options for you because there is an audio side aspect to this as well, right? So here's what I want to say. That Epson 5050 UB is still an excellent looking projector.
Oh, yeah.
It's and I mean honestly, there's nothing at its price point, particularly at that $2,000 price point if you're getting the refurb version of it. That really holds a candle to it. I mean, in terms of just the black level it can produce, the contrast it can produce, the HDR performance that it ends up having because it has that deeper black level and that better contrast than any other projector at that price point. It is a really nice looking projector. I have no reason to warn anybody away from it unless there's somebody who just must have 4K 120 support because it does not have that.
I've become a big fan of refurb stuff lately. I've had good luck. I haven't had a bad experience yet.
And directly from Epson, they are top quality in their refurbished units. So I mean the 5050 UB, it's really hard for me to say that you ought to get something else other than that model if you can afford it at that price and really cannot go any higher in price. And honestly, even against some of the more expensive projectors, it still stands out as potentially the best choice. Also, lens-wise, it's stellar. I mean, it has huge range, vertical and horizontal lens shift, and it's all motorized. Everything is motorized, and it has lens memories. So if you want to do a 2.35 to 1 screen and then go down to a 16:9, like you can motorized with a memory at the press of a button, zoom in and zoom out, and it'll go to the fixed positions that you've set. And it's like it's just a really, really nice projector. So
one of those hard to beat. It fits, that price to performance ratio curve.
That's right.
There's that perfect little part where it starts to skyrocket in price.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where that projector sits.
The only issue, though, is if you are not also upgrading your AV receiver, you're kind of going to want like an HDMI audio extractor in this system because you are going to need to plug your sources. So, I mean, look, your 1080p Blu-ray player, that can still just plug into your Denon X3000 and then feed the projector because there is no HDR, there is no 4K. So out of a 1080p Blu-ray player, you're fine doing that. But for like your Roku, right, you're going to want to start watching those 4K HDR sources.
Yes, you are.
And you're going to need to plug that HDMI connection from the Roku directly into the Epson projector. It's not going to be able to send that 4K HDR signal through your Denon X3000. That means you're going to need an HDMI audio extractor to get the audio back to your Denon X3000. No, that doesn't have to be super expensive because if you're talking about 4K HDR streaming services and yours is a Denon X3000, so it's not doing Atmos or anything, right? So getting 5.1 Dolby Digital signals from your streaming sources is perfectly fine. There's absolutely, they're not really downgrading anything. So, I mean, getting a regular HDMI 2.0 audio extractor that can have an optical audio cable that feeds Dolby Digital to your X3000, that is not expensive or super complicated. So I don't think it's any sort of tremendous downside. It's just a little bit of a wrinkle to consider.
But, I'm cheap, but I'm starting to think, maybe it's time to hit up accessories for less and look at receivers and see what you think.
Well, there's that,
it simplifies the matter. And why spend $1 towards something that you're not putting toward a newer receiver with more capability? I can't imagine it would be that expensive to find a receiver that could do everything you need.
Yeah, but I mean, it's definitely going to be more than the $60 or $70 of the HDMI audio extractor.
It is, but it's maybe
more than that.
Yeah, I would just
if you spend $2,100 and he's out of money, having got the projector, then I mean, like $60-$70 you can probably scrounge up somewhere. So you could get an HDMI audio extractor. Yeah. But I just wanted to throw this out there because you're coming from an 8350. So if you never see the Epson 5050 UB, you don't know how much better the black levels and contrast can be, right? If like true. What I'm getting at is if you spend a little bit less, simplify the audio situation, and still get a very noticeable picture upgrade, not as big of a picture upgrade as getting the 5050 UB, but you're spending less in simplifying the audio situation, then BenQ's HT3560, this is a brand new model, it's DLP. The chip itself is actually 1080p, but they wobble it 4 times per frame to actually give you the full 4K resolution on the screen. Right. It's $1,700 brand new, so it's less expensive than even the refurbished 5050 UB, and it has its own optical digital Toslink connection right on there that supports Dolby Digital 5.1 or HDMI ARC, which you can't actually use with your X3000. But what I'm saying is you can plug your Roku directly into the HD3560 BenQ projector and then just feed an optical cable, which is super cheap, back down to your X3000, and you don't have to buy a separate HDMI audio extractor. So the HT3560 is, without question, a picture quality upgrade over your 8350. Okay. It's better black levels, it's better contrast, it handles HDR, it's 4K resolution. Like, you will notice a picture upgrade. I think the Epson 5050 UB is even more of a picture upgrade. I don't want to mince words about that. Right. But there's a little extra complication with having to get the HDMI audio extractor, and it's more expensive. So
that sounds good. Yeah. Now, see, that's simplicity. You're not adding another thing.
That's right.
And also, even though the BenQ you're suggesting only has like manual lens adjustment, how often do people adjust things, really?
Well, yeah, if you're setting it once. But yeah, it is all manual controls, no power lens controls on the HT3560. And it does have some vertical lens shift, but it's a very small amount. It's like 10% of the image height. And it's only vertical, no horizontal. So you have to be a little bit more careful with physical placement of the BenQ than you would with the Epson 5050. Like I say, I think the Epson 5050 UB is a better projector, but it's more expensive and you'd need an HDMI audio extractor unless you're also upgrading your AV receivers. So you put it all together and I can make a case, I can make an argument for the BenQ.
Yeah. I like that. And it makes me less likely to say, wonder how much a new receiver would be.
That's right.
So, that's where I'm going. All right, let's move on here to Nick, who has a question. We successfully convinced Nick to lean towards getting a 98-inch TCL TV rather than a JVC NP5 projector with a roll-down screen. But he still has a few misgivings, so here we go. Misgiving number 1 is the 98-inch R754 that is currently available for $4,000, basically the same as the R745 series that only comes in smaller screen sizes. If so, it doesn't seem all that impressive in terms of contrast or on the gaming side of things. And since the 98-inch QM8 series just came out and cost $10,000, will there be a replacement soon for the 98-inch R754? Wonderfully confusing model numbers.
Yes, and we unfortunately have to be pedantic on this because the 98-inch is a series of 1, and it is the R754, and it is not related to the R745 series. There is a series of smaller screen sizes that the 98-inch R754 is very, very, very similar to, and that is the TCL R646 series. So if you look up...
They got to start using names and words, I swear.
But if you look up technical reviews of the R646 series, because of course there weren't that many people who did technical measurement reviews of the 98-inch television, but there were plenty that did technical reviews of the R646 series. It's pretty much exactly what's going on there. The R646 series specs and performance lines up really, really closely with the R754. So you can pretty much take what's said in those reviews of the R646 and apply it. So the R646, it does 4K 120, it does VRR, which the R745 series did not do. So that's where he's like, it doesn't seem all that impressive on the gaming side of things. The R646 and the 98-inch R754 have the better local dimming system. So yeah, all of those things. It's a better TV than the R745 series, which I cannot blame anybody for getting mixed up because it's literally just transposing those two numbers.
end up sounding like robots talking to each other with just number.
That's
number,
right.
number.
There is one thing to note about that 98-inch R754, though, which is that it has a highly unusual VESA mounting pattern on the back if you are planning to wall mount it. It's 400 millimeters by 855 millimeters, and the design is a little bit like LG's OLEDs, where it has like a butt at the bottom of the panel. So like the top half of the panel is thinner, and all of the electronics are housed in the bottom half of the panel, and it's got like a little butt that sticks out, and that's where the VESA mounting holes are. So it's all a little bit strange wall mounting that R754, and there are not that many wall mounts that will actually support that very wide 850 millimeter width VESA pattern. It's a little bit strange, and it has to be one where you can connect it to like the bottom of the mount and still have the strength in there to hold it steady because it
can't extend farther down.
Yeah, it's all connecting at the bottom of the TV. Okay. So it's a little bit weird wall mounting that. Just for noting that 98-inch QM8, the brand new one, is a standard 600 millimeter by 600 millimeter VESA. So pretty much any wall mount works on there, and those holes are more or less in the middle of the back of the TV. So it's considerably easier to mount the QM8. But I mean, it's not that the 754 can't be mounted. You just have to be careful on the mount that you choose.
Right. And you also mention here, I see in the notes that Best Buy has a crazy sale.
Yeah, so that QM8, which is new. I mean, it only came out like a month ago. They've got it on sale for $7,000 now for the 98-inch QM8.
Big jump over that 754 as far as price, but dang, that is
sure. But I mean,
it's a big drop from 10 to 7.
It's $12,000 MSRP. It was already selling for $10,000 everywhere, and now it's down to $7,000 already, which is like that is kind of crazy. So look, I mean, if you were like, oh, I just want the newer one, I mean, now it's at $7,000. So I'm throwing it out there because I couldn't help but notice it. As far as is there something coming out to replace the R754? Kinda. I mean, not one for one. There is a brand new model that just came out. It's in the S5 series. It is a step down in every way. It doesn't have any local dimming at all. It is a direct backlight. It is not edge lit, but it has no local dimming whatsoever. So it is definitely a step down. Now, the MSRP on that new S5 98 is $5,000. It's already on sale for $3,000, which is insane. A 98-inch TV for $3,000.
It is getting insane. Technology overall, any kind of tech stuff, I've noticed lately that there's this weird thing where I think AI is setting the prices. I'm not kidding. Like, I think they turn an algorithm at it and say, based on everything we see inputting and sales and stuff, change the price to whatever you think it needs to be to sell more of them and make money, right?
I don't know what's going on there.
And AI goes, okay, 7,000. Oh, what? No, 3,000. Try that for an hour. And then you come back later in the day and it's 4,201.
That S5 series just came out. Like, just came out. Yeah. So to already be $2,000 off. Now, look, I don't really think that this is going to suit what he's looking for. It is not as bright. It doesn't have any local dimming at all. Right. So I mean, it's more HDR compatible than HDR capable. So I don't think the S5 series is really looking for. But basically, the R754 was like, out of these three models, it was the middle in terms of performance, right? It doesn't get as bright as the QM8. It doesn't have as many local dimming zones as the QM8, but it still had very good performance and went in the middle. So now TCL has introduced series that are on either side of it. Yeah. So they got one that's definitely worse and one that is definitely brighter and more local dimming zones. But as we're about to talk about, or in fact, I had the link here. B, the installer, did quite a nice, he's been living with an R754, the 98-inch, for a while. That's been his TV for a while, and he did a head-to-head comparison with the QM8. He just posted that a couple days ago as we recorded this, so quite a new video. And honestly, I mean, same thing that I've been thinking, which is like the QM8, definitely in certain scenes, it gets brighter. Unequivocally, it gets brighter. But it blooms more. The 754 really struck a really good balance of when it's like a predominantly dark scene, the local dimming kicks in and it gets pretty darn black, but it doesn't overdo it. Like, it doesn't get so blindingly bright that you end up with a whole bunch of halos. And the local dimming algorithm they used on the R754 did a nice job of like it's not that there's no blooming. There's going to be blooming on a local dimming
Well, there has to be
LCD
some,
TV.
yeah.
But they, in my opinion, that R754, just like the R646 series and the R635 series that preceded that, I feel like they struck a really good balance with what they did on
So they
the
did
brightness.
local reasonable dimming.
Yeah, and didn't goose the peak brightness so much that there's no way to avoid it. The QM8 gooses the peak brightness so much that there's no way to avoid very visible blooming on that QM8. So honestly, yeah, if you haven't seen that comparison video, I am in pretty much full agreement there. He's like, look, if what matters to you most is having that peak brightness, the brightest highlights you can possibly get, yeah, the QM8 wins, there's no question, and I agree. But if you're like the overall, like the shadow detail not having any sort of dirty screen effect to it, the blooming, like, yeah, okay, if you're looking for it, you can see it, but really being quite reasonable, like all the detail being there, but it not being blindingly bright, like, I think that 754 strikes a really nice balance.
There we go. Well, he's got a few more questions here. There aren't a ton of reviews available for the R754, but the handful that are out there all seem to mention that it doesn't have the best processing. Are they talking about upscaling 1080p content to 4K or something else? I think it's all of that.
Well, I mean, predominantly they're talking about the motion processing, which
Bleh.
just turn it off. Just turn the motion processing off.
Right.
People freak out because when you do the motion resolution test pattern test, or you go to Blur Busters and you look at their little aliens scrolling across the screen,
Right.
people freak out because if you don't turn on some, like the lowest level of motion interpolation, if you don't turn it on, then like, yeah, you get 300 lines of motion resolution, and 300 lines, I got a 4K TV, oh my goodness, like I must be... In real life, you aren't looking at small text scrolling across the screen really fast. I mean,
At a high rate of speed, yeah.
I guess you might be, but like, it just isn't movie content.
So if you're watching nothing but like CNBC tickers all day on your 98-inch screen,
yeah,
maybe then, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it. But it's
Okay,
it's the motion process, and I mean, I agree on the R754. Just like the R646, there is no way of avoiding very obvious soap opera effect. So we have TV like the top end Sonys and LGs now. They do a really good job of, you can turn on a little bit of interpolation and it doesn't put that horrible soap opera effect on there very much. Like they've worked it out. You know, you can set it to like a low setting and it works pretty well. The TCL, the 754 doesn't have that. If you set it to even low, it's like horrific soap opera effect.
It's like
and there's just no
everything is
avoiding it.
camcorder.
So when they're like, look, the video processing isn't the best, I agree, it isn't the best, but also just turn it off and it all looks fine.
Yeah, it's great if you turn it off.
Yeah.
That's a problem solved real quick right there. He's already got a 75-inch TCL 8 series from 2019, the Q825, in his living room, and the 77-inch LG C9 OLED that is in his theater. If he were to get the 98-inch, it would just straight up replace the OLED, and he'd use it for everything in the theater. He's just a bit worried that he's really going to miss that OLED picture quality. Although, to be fair, the JVC projector wasn't going to equal the OLED either, was it?
It was not.
In that scenario, he was still going to have the 77-inch OLED behind the roll-down screen whenever he wanted to use it. If he just sits close enough to his 8 series in the living room to mimic the field of view of a 98-inch, will that give him a really close comparison to how the R754 will look? That is, are the Q825 and the R754 about the same in picture quality? And you could just scooch closer and see. I don't think so.
But I would have to say no. My opinion is no. The Q8 series looks more like the QM8 series. Not really surprising. They were sort of direct fall. I mean, the Q825 was back from 2019. QM8 is now 2023, but they are the like lineage of that series, and they are more similar to one another. So like the Q825, it was the mini LEDs, just like the QM8, and focused more on peak brightness, getting really, really bright, but it has more blooming. than the R754 series. So I wouldn't really say that that's exactly the same. Also, the Q825 tended to crush shadow detail in the blacks more than either of them. They were trying to do what Samsung was trying to do at the time, which was like keep the blooming under control by really mashing on those local dimming zones, but then you would like lose detail in the shadows. The QM8 is a bit better on retaining the shadow details, but then it blooms more as a result.
There you go.
So your Q825 almost sort of falls in the middle, but if anything, I would say it's closer to the QM8 performance than the R754. So you can still do this test because you already have the TV. So in terms of field of view, you'll get that on it. And then if you're like, well, I notice the blooming when I sit this close to the Q825, I'm like, then you probably don't want the QM8. You probably actually want the R754. On the other hand, if you're like, oh, even my Q825 just isn't bright enough and I want even brighter, well, then the QM8 is your choice.
I really don't know how I would ever go from a OLED to something that's not an OLED. A projector has a whole different vibe. Like you don't expect the same results from a projector. You're going for bigness and impact, and it's a different thing, right?
And turning all the lights out because it is always going to be way dimmer.
Right. So I feel like because it's such a different experience, I could go to a projector in a really huge screen in a really dark room, and I wouldn't hate that. But to go to any other flat panel after an OLED, I would be disappointed.
Yeah. But like ever since those TCL R635 series, which then became the 646, which then became the R754, like that whole series I've always been really impressed with. I've always thought that they look way better than they have any right to because for me, for my taste, they struck that nice balance of not having too much blooming, still having the shadow detail. I think they look terrific.
Gotcha. Do you think the 97-inch OLEDs will ever come down below $10,000?
Eventually, yes.
I mean, inevitably at some point, yeah.
We hoped, like we said in the news, that having that new 32-inch size being added to it maybe will help bring the price down, but I wouldn't expect it to get it down below $10,000 from $25,000 that quickly.
No.
They will come down in price precipitously once that 10.5 generation plant finally comes online.
Right.
But that's been delayed to 2026 at this point.
Goodness.
So...
You know, it's always going to be a bit of a niche because there's only so many people who can literally fit a 97-inch TV
But now that we have
house.
the 11th generation LCD fabs, look at how cheap these 98-inch LCDs are getting. So
this is true.
I mean, I don't think the OLEDs are ever going to be that. I don't think they're going to be $3,000 for the 97-inch, but under $10,000 is very much possible once that larger fabrication plant comes online. But yeah, 2026 is the earliest at this point.
So you're probably 4 years away, 3 to 4 years away.
That's why I'm saying, like, you spend $4,000 now, you enjoy the R754 for 5 years, then the 97-inch OLEDs are affordable. Yeah, I think it works out.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Continuing on with another question from him. When he was checking out Arting's reviews of TCL's TVs, he noticed that the native panel contrast, when there's no local dimming being applied, is pretty darn similar across most of the higher-end TVs. They all come in around 7,000 to 1 native LCD panel contrast. But when local dimming is turned on, some of them jump way up in contrast during the ANSI checkerboard pattern, while other models only go up a little bit. Is TCL just playing games with certain models? Yes. And making sure the local dimming zones line up with the squares of the checkerboard pattern? Yes. Or is it that the models where the contrast only goes up a little bit just have poorly implemented local dimming? Where does the R754 fall? And, you know, I've kind of noticed similar things, and my theory is just, well, that's just the limit of the tech, and there's not that much difference from one LCD panel to the other. It's the tricks that you play with said panels that give you the differences in performance in many cases. Not every case, but in many cases.
The backlighting these days is where all the difference is happening. I mean, we've gotten to the point now where, I mean, they've just outright declared there's really not any R&D happening on the LCD panels themselves anymore. About 7,500, 8,000 to 1 is just kind of the limit, and they're not even trying to get better on the native panel contrast anymore. So it's all about the backlights. And yeah, basically it is when the grid pattern of the local dimming happens to line up nicely with the checkerboard pattern, you get those ones that suddenly hit 50,000, 60,000 to 1, whereas a lot of them get like 15,000 to 1, and then some of them it goes from like 7,000 to 8,000, and that means that the local dimming zone was just too big. It's just spilling out because it has to brighten up for the white parts of the checkerboard, and then it's spilling into the black parts.
There you go.
Makes those grayer. So that's all it is. The R754 therefore, like I've been saying, falls into the category. I think they just struck a really nice balance. You don't get the weird backlight pumping. You don't get like the visible grid structure that you sometimes get in things where you can like see the grid of the backlight. Sometimes it doesn't do that. Like they struck a really nice balance with it. So that's where it falls for me.
And that is what's happening in LCD screens nowadays, right?
Yeah.
You're marketing to whether somebody wants blastingly bright and doesn't mind blooming, or wants a little more accuracy. And boy, striking the balance, that's every time I'm looking for a product, I'm trying to find where somebody hit that perfect point.
Like the thing is, as crazy as it is to return a 98-inch TV, like if you purchase from Best Buy or Costco, they will do it. They will take that TV back within the 30-day return window.
Yeah.
So, I think it's worth a try.
I actually do too. It's a pain, but it's worth a try. All right, let's move on to Jonathan. Another question. Jonathan came across an article in the Wall Street Journal praising TV owners who used 4 flat panels matrixed together with a professional 2x2 image processor to create a huge modular display that costs way less than Samsung's The Wall. This is nothing new. We've seen plenty of examples of this in sports bars and live broadcasts on TV, but Jonathan wonders, if you did this at home, wouldn't the visible bezels in between the displays drive you absolutely crazy? Yes! Yes,
I mean, it all depends on what you're displaying, right? Like for the news broadcasts, for the sports broadcasts where they have the huge screen behind them and projection wouldn't make any sense, then doing this is fine, and you're not so worried about being able to see the cross of where the bezels are. And of course, bezels these days on many TVs have gotten really, really thin, but
they're
certainly
there. And
certainly
I'm not
invisible.
watching a movie
Certainly
like that. I'm just
so
not.
no, I wouldn't want to watch a movie like that. You're absolutely right. But I mean, if this is, I actually want like the sports bar feel where I'm going to put up 4 images anyway.
Yeah,
like,
it's for fun and football time and sports bar time, and we're all drinking and we can't see straight anyway. That sounds great.
That's right.
That's what that's for. And here comes another question from Elmer. Elmer uses an NAD T758 version 3 AV receiver. It came with Dirac for automatic room correction. He noticed that after he ran Dirac, the volume seemed to be awfully low. Is that normal? He got a 5.1.4 configuration using Triangle Borea BR03 speakers. He found himself disabling Dirac because it was just so quiet when he turned it on. Can we offer some advice? What is this phenomenon here?
Yeah, so this is a fairly common thing you see people complaining about with Dirac, and it's, I mean, unfortunately, the way that it goes, there's a bit more manual involvement with setting your trim levels and even in some instances your distances. And in the case of your NAD T758V3, it is really one of those quite manual systems. So right on NAD's own support page, when they talk about using Dirac on their models that are going back to this model year, they're like, look, you actually need to go old school, bust out the old SPL meter or get an SPL meter on your app on your phone and set the trim levels and the distances manually before you begin Dirac. Now it's still going to do automatic channel to channel leveling. It's still going to do that for you within the Dirac system, but they're like, you need to go ahead and set the baseline trim levels and distances manually beforehand. Then when you're doing the NAD version of Dirac calibration on that model, you'll notice a lot of the other ones, like in the Dirac process, they have you set the microphone gain, which I never like that's really even an option because that can really throw things off, and then set the master volume within the software for Dirac, and then adjust the individual speaker output levels, which are not the same as the trim levels. So it's a whole, and you do all that in a semi-manual process. Like, it doesn't automate that whole volume leveling process. Now, the key there is that you're just trying to get a signal that no matter what speaker plays the test tone, it doesn't either clip or be too quiet to overcome the ambient noise floor or any, incidental noises that might happen. They're just trying to get you into the butter zone. But the version of Dirac that is working on your T758 is expecting a higher signal level than like every other version of Dirac. In every other version of Dirac, they're like, have the signal levels adjusted. So first of all, don't change your microphone's gain. Just leave it at the 0. Don't go plus or minus on the microphone gain. Just leave the microphone gain alone. And then bring the speaker output levels, all of them, down about 5 decibels before you start. Because you can only bring Dirac speaker output levels in this part of the setup process. You can only bring them down. You cannot boost them at all.
All right.
So start by giving yourself some headroom. Give yourself 5 to 7 decibels of headroom. So just bring all of those sliders across all of those speakers down to begin. Then you go one by one through them, and all the other versions of Dirac on all the other brands, they're looking for it to basically read minus 20. That's what the test signal should read is minus 20. And they're like anywhere between minus 15 and minus 30 is acceptable, but they're pretty much all aiming for minus 20. Not the case on the particular one that you have. They're really looking for minus 14 very specifically. They're like between minus 13 and minus 15. So minus 14 then, when you're saying between those two numbers.
That would be the number between those two.
So yeah, it's a different process doing it on your particular one. Because if you've looked at other Dirac tutorials, including Dirac's own tutorial, it's going to give you this weird result where the signals coming out weren't loud enough. If you set it to the minus 20 like everyone else is telling you, if you didn't give yourself any headroom to begin. So yeah, that's the process. Leave the microphone gain where it is at default. Don't change that. Start before you do any test signals. Bring everything down 5 to 7 dB, all the individual speakers. Then go through the test tones one by one and raise the master volume until you get it reading minus 14 and do the little adjustments on each speaker from there so they all match up. That should get you back to the correct levels.
So it's
very
fiddly,
weird.
But you can compensate.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's good. Hey, I think we only have one more question.
I think we can just bang it out.
I mean,
there we go.
Despite natural disasters and hurricanes and fires and thunderstorms and duct cleanings.
I don't know if anyone's been trying to get into my apartment or not. I can't hear anything.
I don't know. But we've got one more question, and Gurinder's going to wrap it up for us on this crazy week. Gurinder asks this, or says this, with a Denon or Marantz receiver, is there a mode that would let you listen to just the overhead speakers and nothing else? He was actually thinking it would be nice for background music to be able to have that playing strictly out of the overheads so that nobody would have to worry about standing close to a floor level speaker and having it be too loud. Interesting. So for your dinner parties where everyone's talking in little groups and stuff and no one wants to stand next to the blasting speaker, is that a possibility? So
just in terms of a listening mode you can just select easily, no. That isn't a possibility. There is potentially a workaround for doing this with some of the newest models. Okay. So some of the newest models, they let you first of all save 2 different speaker preset configurations. Okay. So that's part of this. And the other thing that the newest models let you do is if it's a model, high-end enough model, so it would be like the X3800 in Denon's lineup or the Cinema 40?
Sure.
50?
Sure.
I'm forgetting
the
which one it
Cinema
is.
45.
The 40 for sure. I don't know if anyway, the ones that have pre-outs, and on the newest models, they now let you choose individual speaker channels as being pre-out only, where it actually turns the internal amplifier for that channel off completely and the signal only comes out of the pre-outs. In the little bit older models, there was a pre-out mode where you could do all or nothing. You could turn all of the internal amplifiers off and only have pre-outs, but it didn't let you do it channel by channel. Yeah. So what you could do, 2 different presets, right? One of the presets, you actually set it up saying, all of my floor level channels are powered externally exclusively. Turn all the internal amplifiers for my floor level channels off, and then save that as speaker preset 2. Yeah. Then when you want to do this, you could go to that. You don't actually have an external amplifier connected, or you power off your external amplifier if you actually do have one. And then the overhead speakers will be the only ones playing. You put it into the all-channel stereo listening mode. And then the overheads will be the only one playing. So that would be a way you could sort of work your way around into doing this if you want to have one of the newest models. You use the 2 speaker presets, you use the pre-amplifier, turn off the internal amplifiers mode, and you could kind of make this happen, but it's not as easy as
too bad. It's not too bad. It's clever workaround.
It's not quite as easy as just choosing the all channel stereo mode that's there. It's not quite that simple. Yeah.
I like the ceiling party mode. That should be a feature So Denon and Marantz, since I'm sure all of their engineers listen, definitely add ceiling party mode.
Or if you just want to be like, what are my Atmos speakers actually doing in this movie? I want to completely isolate them. That would be a way to do
that would be kind of
too.
fun, just to see what's really up there and really analyze that staticky Oppenheimer sound that was
That's right.
that was increasing the tension, and listen to it very specifically. All righty then. Well, look at that. Did we
That's
actually?
right.
Have you and I ever gotten through every single question?
We cleared the board. I think it happened one other time, or we only left one or two. So yeah, there we go. We did it. It's a good time. Send in your questions. Somebody will be here next week. We'll make it happen somehow. Who knows what it'll be? But yeah, send them on in. A question at avrant.com. That is our email address. That is by far the best way to reach us and the place to send your questions. So email us question at avrant.com. It's a good time. We've got an open slate here for your questions coming in.
That's right.
And yeah, just want to thank our listeners of the week before we go one more time. So patreon.com/AVRant podcast is the place to go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 133 patrons over there. And Russell, thank you for being one of them. And then thank you to Nick, Matt, Elmer, Gurinder, and Greg for sending in your notes of gratitude and encouragement to us. We very much appreciate them.
We can use that, yes.
That's right. Big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. So on behalf of Tom Andry, hoping he's safe, hoping his family's safe, hoping that there's no destruction to their place. Yeah, fingers crossed for him. So on behalf of Tom Andry and for AV Rant, I am Rob H.
And I'm Lee Overstreet. Go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.